The lights dim. The arena hums with anticipation. Thousands of fans hold their breath as Keith Urban steps into the spotlight. The familiar chords of his guitar echo through the hall. But this time, something feels different. His hand, where a wedding ring once gleamed under the stage lights, is bare. He pauses for a heartbeat, eyes glistening, and simply whispers, "It's been a journey." No explanations. No denial. Just silence. And a gesture that says everything words never could. That moment wasn't just another concert. It was the first time Keith Urban appeared in public after news broke that his 19-year marriage to Nicole Kidman had come to an end. And for fans who had long seen them as Hollywood's most unbreakable couple, the sight was both heartbreaking and haunting. After nearly 2 decades together, Keith finally admitted what many had quietly suspected, that the cracks in their seemingly perfect marriage had been there all along. For years, he'd sung about redemption, about love's power to save and destroy, and now, in his own words, he confessed that he blew the marriage up to smithereens. The truth wasn't scandalous. It was human. A story of love, addiction, forgiveness, and the slow unraveling of 2 people who once promised forever. What had been hidden behind those red carpet smiles? What pain lingered in the spaces between movie premieres and music awards? How does a couple who shared so much love, who once called each other their safe place, end up world apart? Was it fame, distance, or something darker that finally pushed them over the edge? Tonight, we'll uncover that story, the real one. From their first magical meeting at a Hollywood gala to the battles Keith fought with addiction, the silent years of struggle, and finally, the painful confession that changed everything. This isn't a tale of gossip or glamour. It's a story of 2 souls who try to hold on, and what happens when even the strongest love begins to break. So let's go back to the beginning, before the heartbreak, before the headlines, before fame, before marriage. Keith Lionel Urban was born on October 26, 1967, in Whangarei, New Zealand, a place far removed from the neon lights of Nashville or the glitz of Hollywood that would later define his life. When he was still a child, his parents moved to Caboolture, a small town in Queensland, Australia. It was there, surrounded by open fields and country air, that a young Keith picked up his first guitar at just 6 years old. His father ran a convenience store and would often play country records behind the counter. Little did he know that those twangy tunes would plant the seed of a lifelong passion in his son. By the time Keith was a teenager, he was performing in local pubs and talent shows, winning small competitions, and slowly carving a path in Australia's modest country scene. He was driven, but success didn't come overnight. The road was long and rough. Years of small gigs, failed record deals, and near misses. But his persistence paid off. In the early 1990s, Keith Urban moved to Nashville, Tennessee, the heart of country music, to chase his dream. His sound was different. He wasn't just another cowboy hat singer. He blended traditional country storytelling with pop rock energy, creating something fresh that resonated with both old-school fans and new listeners. By the early 2000s, Keith had become a superstar. Albums like Golden Road and Be Here topped charts, and It's Like Somebody Like You and You'll Think of Me made him one of the most celebrated voices in country music. He went on to win 4 Grammy Awards, 15 Academy of Country Music Awards, and multiple Country Music Association Awards, earning a reputation not just as a musician, but as a true craftsman of emotion. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, another story was unfolding, that of Nicole Mary Kidman. She was born on June 20th, 1967, in Honolulu, Hawaii, while her Australian parents were there on academic visas. Shortly after, the family returned to Sydney, where Nicole grew up. Shy and introspective as a child, she found her escape in acting. By her teenage years, she was appearing in Australian film and television, showing an intensity and maturity well beyond her age. Her breakout came with the 1989 thriller Dead Calm, followed by the acclaimed miniseries Bangkok Hilton. Hollywood noticed. Within a few years, Nicole was starring in major American films, Days of Thunder, where she met her first husband, Tom Cruise, To Die For, and Batman Forever. Her career continued to soar through the 1990s and 2000s. Eyes Wide Shut Moulin Rouge, and The Hours showcase her range, from dazzling showgirl to tortured writer, and earned her critical acclaim, including an Academy Award for Best Actress. Nicole had become one of the most respected and powerful women in film. Yet behind the elegance and success, she carried a quiet longing for something real, something grounding, a kind of love that fame couldn't offer. That love would find her in 2005 at an event called Day LA, a gala celebrating Australians in Hollywood. Keith Urban was performing that night. Nicole was an honored guest. She later admitted she felt an instant connection. "I remember thinking he's the kind of man I could marry." For Keith, the attraction was mutual but cautious. Both had lived through fame's storms and heartbreak. They began talking, slowly building a bond that felt genuine and pure in a world full of noise. Their romance blossomed quietly but powerfully. By November 2005, they were officially a couple. Just months later, in May 2006, they announced their engagement. And on June 25, 2006, in a candlelit ceremony at Cardinal Soretti Memorial Chapel in Sydney, Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman became husband and wife. The wedding was intimate, emotional, and deeply personal, a union of two worlds, the movie star and the country singer, the Hollywood icon and the small-town dreamer. The media called them a power couple, but to those who watched them that night, it wasn't about power. It was about redemption. Two people who had lived in the public eye, carrying scars from the past, had finally found a reason to believe in love again. And for a while, it truly seemed like a fairy tale come to life. From the moment Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman said, "I do," in that candlelit Sydney chapel in 2006, their love story seemed to glow with hope. For a while, it truly was a picture of serenity. Two of the world's most famous people, defying odds to build something genuine. But behind that glow, their marriage was a delicate balancing act, one that required grace, patience, and constant effort to protect from the glare of fame. Keith's world was loud, stadiums packed with fans, endless tours across continents, a creative life lived on the road. Nicole's was disciplined and precise, long filming schedules, months on location, and the constant pressure of maintaining her place at the top of Hollywood's hierarchy. Early in their marriage, the couple made a quiet pact. No matter where work took them, they would never go more than a few weeks apart. Nicole later said that she followed Keith from city to city just to be near him, even if it meant waking up in one country and falling asleep in another. It wasn't just romantic. It was survival. Their first few years as husband and wife weren't easy. In late 2006, just months after the wedding, Keith checked himself into rehab to confront his ongoing battle with addiction, a painful but necessary step. Nicole stood by his side, fiercely protective and loyal, visiting him often and asking for privacy. That experience became the foundation of their bond, not a story of scandal, but one of resilience and forgiveness. By 2008, after weathering the storm together, their love had deepened, and it was about to grow even more. On July 7, 2008, in Nashville, Tennessee, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Sunday Rose. Keith called her his miracle, saying that fatherhood gave him a purpose beyond fame or music. For Nicole, Sunday was a new beginning. After years of longing for more children following her adoption of 2 kids with Tom Cruise, she said Sunday's birth filled a part of her she thought might remain empty. They raised her quietly, away from flashing cameras, preferring the calm of their Nashville home over the chaos of Los Angeles. Then, in December 2010, their family grew again. Through gestational surrogacy, they welcomed another daughter, Faith Margaret, whose middle name honored Nicole's late grandmother. The couple issued a simple statement, filled with gratitude. "Our family is truly blessed and we couldn't be happier." From then on, Keith and Nicole were not just global stars. They were devoted parents, fiercely protective of their 2 girls. Both have spoken about keeping their daughters grounded, limiting technology, and choosing family dinners over red carpets whenever possible. Their life together spanned continents. They built homes in Nashville, their primary base, a mansion in Beverly Hills, a farmhouse in Sutton Forest just outside Sydney, and an apartment overlooking Sydney Harbor. They split time between the United States and Australia, depending on work and family commitments. Despite their success, they tried to live as simply as possible. Nicole often described Nashville as her sanctuary, a place where Keith could write music and she could walk the streets unnoticed, just another mom picking up her kids from school. And even amid the chaos, there were small, intimate details that revealed the heart of their relationship. In one interview, Nicole shared a playful secret that one of their little marriage rituals involved a double-headed shower, so they could shower together whenever Keith was home. "That's our thing," she said with a smile. "We always shower together. That's just what we do." Fans adored this glimpse into their private world. Proof that beyond the fame, they were simply two people trying to stay close in the simplest ways. Still, it wasn't always easy. Keith's touring schedule meant months apart. Nicole's films often shot overseas for weeks on end. The demands of fame, endless travel, and public curiosity added pressure. They became experts at deflecting rumors and gossip, holding tightly to each other in public, but fighting exhaustion in private. "You just make it work," Keith once said. "Love is not something that happens to you. It's something you work at every day." And for years, they did make it work. They smiled through premieres, sang to each other on stage, and raised their daughters with pride. From the outside, it was a perfect love story. Two stars who'd found their forever. But beneath the grace and affection, the cracks were beginning to form. Cracks that even love and loyalty couldn't always mend. For Keith Urban, the spotlight has always been both a gift and a curse. Behind the charm, the effortless smile, and the magnetic presence on stage lay a man who had spent years fighting demons that fame only made louder. His relationship with addiction began long before he met Nicole Kidman, back in the late 1990s. When his career was on a rise, and the pressure to keep delivering hits was suffocating, he turned to alcohol and cocaine to quiet the noise. At first, it was about escape, a way to handle the long nights and the loneliness that came with life on the road. But like so many artists before him, Keith found himself caught in a cycle that quickly began to control him. By the time he achieved international success in the early 2000s, the cost of that escape was becoming clear. He would later admit that his addiction nearly destroyed everything he had worked for. In interviews, he's spoken about how he lost sight of who he was, saying that at his lowest, "I didn't care if I lost it all." Music had always been his salvation, but even that began to slip away. He would show up performances exhausted, detached, a shell of the vibrant performer fans adored. Those close to him worried that if he didn't change, he wouldn't survive. When Keith met Nicole in 2005, she had no idea how deep his struggle went. To her, he was kind, humble, and free-spirited, the kind of man who grounded her after years in Hollywood's chaos. But as their love grew, so did the strain of his hidden battle. Only a few months after their fairy tale wedding in June 2006, Keith relapsed. The timing was heartbreaking. What should have been the happiest time of their lives became one of the darkest. In October that year, he checked himself into the Betty Ford Center in California, seeking treatment for alcohol abuse. In a statement to fans, he wrote, "I deeply regret the hurt this has caused Nicole and the ones who love and support me." It was a raw confession, one that revealed the fragility behind the couple's public smiles. For Nicole, it was a moment that tested the strength of her love. Most newlyweds spend their first months traveling or building a home. Nicole spent hers waiting outside a rehab center, holding on to faith that the man she loved could find his way back to himself. She never walked away, never gave interviews about his addiction, never blamed him publicly. Instead, she said quietly, "We're learning about each other and healing together." That commitment became the bedrock of their marriage. Keith completed his rehab program and emerged determined to rebuild not just his career, but his marriage. He spoke later about the moment Nicole intervened, saying, "I was very, very lucky to have Nick in my life at that time. She was the one who called the people on me." That act, her decision to step in rather than step away, saved him. "She did the right thing," he said. "Nick saved my life." But recovery isn't a finish line. It's a lifelong climb. Even after leaving rehab, Keith described the constant vigilance it takes to stay sober. In interviews over the years, he's been brutally honest about that ongoing battle. He admitted that he nearly lost his marriage again because of the emotional fallout that addiction leaves behind. The guilt, the anxiety, the need for control. "I blew up the marriage to smithereens," he confessed recently in a moment of stark honesty. I nearly lost everything because I wasn't honest with myself. That admission hit hard for fans who had watched the couple appear inseparable for nearly 2 decades. But for Keith, it wasn't about blame. It was about truth. At a gala appearance in 2025, he reflected on how his addictive patterns didn't just end with rehab. Addiction doesn't leave quietly, he said. It's always whispering, waiting for a crack in the armor. He talked about how easy it is to relapse, not necessarily into drinking, but into the same behaviors: emotional withdrawal, isolation, and denial. I let those things creep back in, he admitted, and they almost cost me my family. Nicole, for her part, has always handled those confessions with quiet grace. While she rarely speaks about Keith's addiction directly, she's hinted at the emotional toll of living with someone who's constantly in recovery. In one interview, she said, "Love is a choice every day. It's not just a feeling, it's work. But when you believe in someone, you fight for them." That fight defined much of their early marriage. Still, no matter how much love or willpower they brought to the table, the shadow of addiction never completely disappeared. Even as Keith celebrated years of sobriety, he was open about the fragility of that peace. He poured it into his music. Songs like Coming Home and For You carried echoes of redemption and remorse. Behind the lyrics were real fears. The fear of slipping, of disappointing his wife, of becoming the man he once was. To the world, Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman appeared strong, untouchable. But inside their private world, the struggle never fully stopped. The tension lingered. Late-night phone calls during tours, long absences, the loneliness of separate worlds. For a long time, they fought through it together. Yet, even the most resilient love could be worn down by years of unseen battles. Keith's recovery was and still is a triumph, but it came at a cost. Sobriety gave him clarity, but also forced him to face the damage addiction had done, not only to his health, but to the woman who had stood beside him through it all. And as time passed, that realization became both his greatest burden and, perhaps, his truest confession. For years, Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman seemed to have found a rhythm, a delicate balance between their careers, family, and the fragile peace that comes after surviving addiction and public life. They were the picture of resilience, hand in hand at red carpet events, sharing tender moments in interviews and posting glimpses of their home life that fans adored. But as the years went on, something began to shift, not all at once, but slowly in small, almost imperceptible ways. The smiles still appeared, but they didn't quite reach their eyes. Their public appearances grew less frequent. The couple who once couldn't stop gushing about each other began to sound careful. Observers first noticed it during award season, when Keith attended several events alone, a rare occurrence for a couple who, for nearly 2 decades, had been inseparable at public functions. When asked about Nicole's absence, Keith offered polite, rehearsed answers. "She's working on a project. We're both just busy right now." But his tone carried a hint of hesitation, as though he was choosing his words carefully. Fans could sense the distance, not dramatic, but unmistakable. In one particularly awkward red carpet interview, a reporter asked Keith how Nicole was handling their time apart. He paused, gave a small smile, and replied, "She's doing great. We're both doing great." His expression, though, told another story. It was the kind of moment that felt ordinary to outsiders, but revealing to anyone who had followed them for years. The spark that once defined them seemed dimmer, and their once effortless chemistry felt strained. Around the same time, Nicole's interviews began taking on a more introspective, even somber tone. In a Vogue profile published shortly before the official split, she reflected on the unpredictability of life in a way that caught many readers' attention. "How many times do you have to be taught," she asked, "that you think you know where your life is going, and then it isn't going that direction?" It was a line that sounded like philosophy, but for those reading between the lines, it felt like a quiet admission. Her words hinted at uncertainty, perhaps even resignation, as though she had already accepted that the life she had built might be changing course. Nicole has always been known for her grace and restraint, rarely giving the media more than she intends to. But over the years, she's been candid about the pressure that comes with living under constant public scrutiny. In an interview with Fox News, she admitted that the intense spotlight and endless speculation could destroy you if you let it. She described the emotional toll of trying to protect a marriage when every gesture, every absence, every word is dissected online. People think they know you, she said, but they're seeing fragments, and those fragments can hurt. Those fragments, magnified by tabloids and social media, started to take a toll on the couple's image. Headlines began to hint at emotional distance and living separate lives. Paparazzi photos of Nicole attending events without her husband or Keith touring without her presence fueled endless speculation. Some outlets whispered about jealousy or infidelity, though no credible evidence ever supported such claims. It was media noise, but like all noise, it was hard to ignore. Fans noticed subtler things too. During Keith's interviews, he began focusing more on his music than on family anecdotes, a sharp contrast to earlier years when he would light up talking about Nicole and the kids. Nicole, too, seemed more guarded, often redirecting questions about her marriage to her work or her daughters. In one appearance, when asked if she and Keith had a secret to lasting love, she gave a polite smile and said, "Every relationship has its seasons." To the casual viewer, it was an elegant deflection. To longtime followers, it sounded like a quiet acknowledgement that something had changed. Even their physical presence together began to reveal cracks in the facade. Gone were the frequent red carpet embraces or playful interactions that once melted the internet. At one film premiere, the couple posed for photos with a noticeable gap between them, subtle but symbolic. Social media lit up with comments from fans asking if they were okay. Some defended them, others speculated. But the truth, as it often is in Hollywood, was more complicated than any headline could capture. Behind closed doors, those who knew them described a couple trying to hold on while their lives pulled them in opposite directions. Keith's touring schedule remained relentless. Months on the road, long rehearsals, endless media obligations. Nicole's acting career continued to flourish, with filming taking her across continents for months at a time. The distance that once seemed manageable began to feel like a chasm. Yet through it all, both Keith and Nicole maintained their dignity, never lashing out publicly or confirming the rumors that swirled around them. They had built their marriage on privacy, and even as it began to fracture, they held that line. Still, silence is a language of its own, and in their silences, fans heard everything. By the time whispers of a split began to surface in early 2025, few were truly surprised. What had once been dismissed as tabloid noise now felt inevitable. But even then, the question lingered. What really happened behind those closed doors? Was it fame, distance, or something deeper that caused the unraveling of a love story once thought unshakable? In 2025, the world woke up to the news that few ever expected to see confirmed. After nearly 2 decades together, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban had officially separated. The reports came first from Page 6, followed by official filings in Los Angeles County records that stated Nicole had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. It was a phrase familiar to Hollywood, but shocking when attached to two people who had long been the gold standard of endurance in an industry built on fleeting love. For years, they had seemed untouchable, the rare power couple who had not only survived fame, but appeared to thrive in it. Yet behind that image, something had quietly broken. When the story broke, neither Keith nor Nicole rushed to issue statements. For weeks, there was silence. Fans speculated endlessly. Was it distance, work, or the ghost of Keith's past return to haunt them? The truth, as it turned out, was more painful and more human than anyone had imagined. That truth came not in a press release, but in Keith's own words, raw, unscripted, and heavy with regret. At a charity awards gala in Nashville in early 2025, Keith Urban stood before an audience that had cheered him for decades. He looked tired, reflective, the version of a man who had been through something life-altering. During his acceptance speech, after thanking the organization and his peers, his tone shifted. "You can have everything," he said quietly, "and still lose the one thing that matters most." Then, pausing, his voice catching, he added, "I blew up the marriage to smithereens." The crowd fell silent. There was no attempt to soften the blow, no clever phrasing or metaphor, just a man admitting, finally, what had long been suspected. Keith didn't elaborate that night, but in follow-up interviews, he opened up more than ever before. He spoke about how addiction had always been a shadow over their love story, one that he thought he'd conquered, but that never truly left him. Addiction doesn't die, he said. It hides. And if you stop paying attention, even for a moment, it comes back and takes everything you've built. He described how the early months of his marriage to Nicole, which should have been the happiest of his life, became instead a painful lesson in self-destruction. He recalled entering rehab in 2006, just 4 months after their wedding, and how Nicole had saved him then by refusing to give up. "I owe her everything," he said. "She was the one who made the call, who said, 'You need help.' And I didn't listen soon enough." But the more haunting part of his confession wasn't about the past. It was about what came later. Keith admitted that even years after rehab, the patterns of addiction never truly left him. Not the substances, but the behaviors, the emotional distance, the secrecy, the constant need for control. "I was sober," he said, "but I wasn't healed. I thought I was doing everything right, but inside, I was still fighting the same demons." That quiet battle, he suggested, eroded the foundation of their marriage little by little. The realization hit fans hard because it reframed everything they thought they knew about Keith and Nicole's relationship. All the photos, all the awards night smiles, the loving posts, they had been real, but they had existed alongside a pain most never saw. For years, both had protected that image, not out of vanity, but out of hope. Hope that they could still fix what was broken. Looking back, Nicole's interviews in the years leading up to the split seemed filled with subtle warnings. Her comments about unpredictability. You think you know where your life is going, and then it isn't going that direction, suddenly felt prophetic. She had been speaking from a place of awareness, of quiet exhaustion. She once said in an interview, "I don't talk publicly about struggles because marriage isn't a headline. It's a choice." Those words now carried a bittersweet echo. For Keith, the 2025 confession wasn't just about taking responsibility. It was about finally telling the truth, even if it came too late. When asked in an interview what he meant by blew up the marriage, he explained, "It wasn't one thing. It was 1,000 small things. The lies you tell yourself, the moments you shut down instead of opening up, and by the time you realize it, you've built walls you can't tear down." He spoke about how success had masked the cracks for years. The tours, the albums, the awards, they gave him something to hide behind. "You can stand on stage in front of 20,000 people," he said, "and still feel completely alone." That loneliness, he admitted, became a cycle, one he didn't know how to break. Even with someone as loving as Nicole by his side, what made Keith's confession so powerful wasn't just the honesty, but the humility. He didn't blame fame, schedules, or the media. He blamed himself. "Nick gave me grace more times than I deserved," he said. "But even love like that has a limit. I didn't realize how far I'd pushed it until it was gone." In hindsight, it was a confession fans had both dreaded and expected. For years, whispers about emotional distance and unresolved issues had floated through tabloids and social media. But no one could have imagined that the man who wrote songs about devotion and gratitude would one day admit to being the architect of his own heartbreak. The admission also redefined how people viewed Nicole's silence throughout the separation. She never retaliated, never gave interviews or statements blaming Keith. Instead, she focused on her daughters, her film projects, and her quiet faith. Those close to her said that she believed in forgiveness, but not at the expense of her peace. In that sense, Keith's confession wasn't just about his own pain. It was a recognition of what Nicole had endured. The years she spent holding him together while quietly falling apart herself. His words, "I blew up the marriage," weren't an accusation, but an elegy for a love that was real, deep, but ultimately unsustainable. When Keith walked off the stage that night, the applause was hesitant, respectful, but subdued. Fans weren't celebrating his pain. They were acknowledging his courage. Because for the first time in 19 years, the man who had built a life on melodies and metaphors spoke without music. And the truth, raw and unfiltered, was louder than any song he'd ever written. By the fall of 2025, what had begun as whispers finally became undeniable truth. After months of speculation, Nicole Kidman officially filed for divorce from Keith Urban on September 30th, 2025, citing irreconcilable differences. The filing confirmed what fans had feared since early summer. that one of Hollywood's most beloved couples had quietly separated after 19 years of marriage. According to Cosmopolitan and People, the two had been living apart for several months prior to the announcement. Friends close to the couple revealed that the decision wasn't sudden. It had been a long, painful process marked by distance, reflection, and the slow realization that their paths had permanently diverged. The news sent shockwaves across the entertainment world. For nearly 2 decades, Keith and Nicole had embodied stability, proof that love could survive fame, addiction, and relentless scrutiny. But now, headlines declare what fans had long dreaded. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban split after 19 years. The phrasing was simple, but the emotional weight behind it was enormous. Only days after the story broke, Keith made his first public appearance, a concert in Nashville that was supposed to be a celebration of his latest tour. Instead, it became something else entirely, a quiet, emotional farewell to a chapter of his life. Fans immediately noticed the absence of his wedding ring, his left hand bare under the stage lights. Midway through performance, he paused before singing The Fighter, the 2017 hit he had once written for Nicole as a tribute to her love and strength. But this time, he changed the line. Instead of singing, "What if I fall?" "I won't let you fall," he softly murmured. "What if we fall?" "We already did." The crowd went silent, some crying, others whispering that this was his way of saying goodbye. In the days that followed, the New York Post and Page 6 published photos of Keith leaving his Nashville studio alone, head down, avoiding cameras. He gave no interviews, no statements. Only that haunting moment on stage spoke for him. Meanwhile, Nicole was seen across the world in Paris, attending Fashion Week with her 2 daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret. She debuted a new look, sleek bangs, a fresh-cut hairstyle that many interpreted as symbolic of a new beginning. Dressed in black and walking arm in arm with her daughters, she looked poised, calm, and in control, though those who know her say she was devastated but resolute. Cosmopolitan described her appearance as quietly powerful, the look of a woman reclaiming her identity after years of emotional turbulence. The media frenzy that followed was relentless. Every gesture, every lyric, every outfit was dissected for hidden meaning. Some tabloids, like the Daily Beast, went further, speculating about possible betrayal or outside involvement. Rumors surfaced suggesting tension within Keith's touring crew, including unfounded claims about closeness between him and a longtime guitarist. However, no credible source or statement ever confirmed these allegations, and representatives for both stars declined to comment. It was a reminder of how, in the glare of celebrity, even heartbreak becomes a spectacle. Behind the headlines, the legal proceedings began to unfold quietly. According to Page 6, Nicole's divorce filing requested that she be recognized as the primary residential parent for their daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret. Sources close to her described the decision as practical, not punitive. The girls' school and social life were based in Nashville, but Nicole wanted to ensure stability amid the transition. Keith, sources said, was cooperative and respectful, wanting to shield the children from the chaos of publicity. Friends and insiders spoke of deep sadness but little anger. One close family friend told People, they still cared deeply for each other, but love wasn't enough anymore. There was too much history, too much pain. Another source added, Keith's honesty about his struggles came from a place of remorse, not deflection. Nicole just couldn't keep carrying the weight. Social media reactions reflected the heartbreak of fans worldwide. Many flooded comment sections with messages of support. They were my hope that real love could last in Hollywood. Others praised their maturity in handling the split privately. On Twitter, one fan wrote, they never drag each other through the mud. That's love, even in ending. As the weeks passed, both seemed to retreat into their respective worlds. Keith threw himself into his music, reportedly spending long nights recording new material in his Nashville studio, songs described by insiders as achingly personal and raw. Nicole, meanwhile, focused on her upcoming limited series and her daughters. Photographers often captured her on morning walks, coffee in hand, with the girls beside her, small, grounded moments in the midst of public upheaval. Yet, even amid the pain, both remained graceful in silence. Neither issued statements attacking the other or correcting every rumor. It was as if they had silently agreed to let their dignity speak louder than any headline. That restraint, ironically, reminded the world why their story had always stood apart from typical Hollywood drama. By late October, Keith performed again, his first televised appearance since the divorce news. This time, he didn't avoid the topic. Before performing a new song, he told the audience, "Sometimes love isn't lost. It just changes shape. It becomes gratitude." The crowd erupted in applause, but his eyes betrayed both sorrow and acceptance. For fans who watched their love story unfold since 2005, from that first meeting at the Day LA Gala to their wedding in Sydney, to 2 daughters and nearly 2 decades of shared life, it was the end of an era. But for Keith and Nicole, it wasn't about endings anymore. It was about healing, acceptance, and the quiet acknowledgement that even the deepest love stories can reach their final verse. In the wake of everything, what lingered most wasn't bitterness or scandal, but a collective sense of mourning, not just a couple, but for what they represented. In a world of fleeting connections, they had made us believe in forever. And even as forever came to an end, they reminded everyone watching that honesty, no matter how painful, is its own kind of grace. In the end, the story of Keith Urban and Nicole Kidman isn't one of failure. It's one of humanity. For nearly 2 decades, they lived out what millions believed was the perfect Hollywood romance. The movie star and the country singer, both Australian, both at the top of their worlds, somehow managing to stay grounded in love. They became a symbol of endurance, proof that fame didn't have to destroy intimacy. But as their journey unfolded, it revealed a deeper truth. Even the most ideal love stories carry silent battles. What we saw, the red carpets, the laughter, the shared glances, was only one side of a much more complex reality. Keith's admission that he blew up the marriage to smithereens didn't just shatter the illusion of perfection. It reframed their entire story. It forced fans to look back at their marriage not as a fairy tale gone wrong, but as a human story of 2 people fighting for connection in the face of relentless pressure. His confession wasn't about betrayal. It was about struggle. It illuminated how addiction, even long after recovery, can quietly shape relationships, not through chaos, but through emotional distance, fragility, and guilt. Nicole's quiet resilience throughout the years now reads differently, too. Not as effortless grace, but as endurance of someone who loved deeply, forgave often, but eventually had to protect her own peace. Together, they represent the full arc of love's possibilities: attraction, salvation, support, strain, and ultimately, release. Their relationship began as a sanctuary. Keith often said Nicole saved him, and she once called him her safe harbor. But sanctuaries can become prisons when the weight of healing falls unevenly. Over time, the dynamic shifted. What began as rescue evolved into survival. And when Keith finally admitted the toll of his own demons, it wasn't a revelation betrayal. It was a reckoning with himself. Fame magnified every moment of that reckoning. For public couples, love exists under constant surveillance. Every absence becomes a rumor. Every smile performance. Nicole once said, "Public judgment can destroy you if you let it." And her words now echo louder than ever. What audiences saw was the pressure of expectation. 2 people trying to live authentically while the world demanded a perfect picture. Their split isn't unique in that sense. It's part of a long history of famous relationships undone not by lack of love, but by the impossibility of living privately in public. But even amid heartbreak, there's something profoundly hopeful about how they handled it. They never turned their pain into spectacle. They never weaponized their fame against each other. And that, perhaps, is the truest sign of love's legacy: choosing dignity when the world is watching. For their daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, this might be the most lasting lesson. They've seen their parents not just as stars, but as flawed, evolving humans, capable of mistakes, remorse, and growth. In a world where image often matters more than truth, that lesson is invaluable. Can people change? Keith's confession suggests that they can, but not always in time to repair what's broken. Yet, in owning his failures publicly, he offered something rare: accountability. And for Nicole, her silence wasn't avoidance. It was strength. She chose to close the chapter quietly, without bitterness, showing that endings can coexist with compassion. So what does it all mean? Perhaps that love, even when it fades, still has purpose. That honesty, even when it hurts, can redeem. And that letting go isn't always about giving up. It's about acknowledging what once was and making peace with what will never be again. Their story isn't just about romance or loss. It's about the courage to face yourself in full view of the world. In that way, Keith and Nicole's marriage, even in its end, remains extraordinary. It reminds us that the truest legacy of love isn't permanence, it's growth. And sometimes, the most beautiful part of a love story isn't how it lasts, but how it teaches us to begin again. Keith Urban stood on stage, guitar in hand, the lights soft but unrelenting. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, his left hand was bare. No wedding ring, no symbol of the love that once steadied him. He played through the set with his usual soul, but there was a heaviness in every note, a kind of quiet confession without words. That image, the artist stripped of illusion, feels like the perfect ending to a story that was always more human than Hollywood ever allowed it to be. After 19 years of marriage, what the world only whispered has now been spoken aloud. Addiction and inner turmoil were not just footnotes in their love story. They were central to it. Keith's admission that he blew up the marriage isn't about scandal. It's about truth. It confirms what many sense beneath the surface. That even the strongest unions can falter when old wounds resurface, and that love, no matter how deep, sometimes isn't enough to silence the ghosts of the past. Nicole's grace throughout the years, her quiet resilience, now carries even deeper meaning. She wasn't playing the perfect wife. She was surviving, forgiving, and finally, choosing peace. So where does that leave us, the witnesses to their beautiful, broken fairy tale? Does knowing the truth change how we see them? Or does it simply remind us that love and pain are often intertwined, that even the brightest stars stumble in the dark? In the end, their story isn't about fame or scandal. It's about 2 human beings, flawed, brave, and searching, doing their best to hold on to love in a world that never stops watching. And maybe that's what makes their ending so heartbreakingly real.